All right, so everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to be joined by Sean over at Kickfurther. I know we usually do like very broad webinars, like on marketing or sales or brand messaging and packaging, but we had a lot of people kind of asking, especially coming out of the pandemic, and I know a lot of people are trying to raise capital and figure out how they're going to finance their next rounds of production and everything. So I wanted to reach out to Sean and thought it would be a great topic to kind of dive into for this month's webinar. And really talk about kind of the ins and outs of inventory financing, what options are available to you. And then, Sean will talk a little bit at the end about kind of like what Kickfurther does and how it might be a benefit to you. We are going to record the whole thing, put it up on our YouTube channel for our larger audience as well. So don't feel like you got to, scrounge to take a bunch of notes or anything like that. We'll make it all available on our channel. So Sean, I'll kind of turn it over to you. And then, if anybody has any questions throughout, feel free to like kind of click to raise your hand, or we'll open it up to questions at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Cameron. Well, it's really nice to be here. Nice to meet all of you. And my name's Sean De Clercq. I'm the founder and CEO of Kickfurther. I started this business running a merchandising company 7 years ago now, where we were buying from suppliers over in China primarily, customizing the products a little bit, and then selling them as exclusives, wholesale orders to retailers here in the US. So, my background is in supply chain management, and a critical component of that is the inventory finance piece of it. So we saw that this was a problem for product businesses, really of all shapes and sizes, whether they're e-commerce or wholesale or omni-channel distribution. And there wasn't really a good solution for inventory finance, that problem quite specifically. And in the last 7 years, having built Kickfurther, I found a lot of solutions, and there's plenty of people that are working to help solve that problem now. So happy to talk through some of those for the various companies at different stages, and what what I think makes sense right now, and what some current opportunities are, if that sounds right.
So Sean, obviously you kind of mentioned like we're going into the holiday season. Obviously that's kind of a time where people are ramping up production and things like that. For brands that haven't raised a traditional seed round or an A round, or even kind of a friends and family round, what are kind of the options that are available to them for inventory financing traditionally? I mean, like what really, if I'm just starting from scratch, what are going to be my options to be able to meet the orders that I have coming up in the coming months?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's such a broad question because product businesses are so different, right? So it's like the answer is hugely different if you're doing, 5K a month of sales, just through e-commerce, through a Shopify storefront, versus $1 million of inventory, 60% wholesale, 40% direct to consumer, right? So it's like the reality is that what financing solution makes the most sense depends on what stage your business is in, and really what's available to you, right? So if we wanted to start, and Cameron, maybe you could kind of give me an idea of where we could start in that spectrum of your audience, what would make the biggest impact for them?
So most of the brands that we work with do under $1 million in sales a year. Most of them are in the food and beverage space, and most of them are fulfilling orders for, small, medium, natural grocery stores. So nothing like a crazy, like a Target or a Walmart order quite yet. So really kind of like sticking with that category, and then also really like that order size.
Right. Okay, great. So if you're looking at under $1 million of revenue in the last 12 months, but you're selling to groups like natural grocers, and you have purchase orders, right? Then probably one of the good opportunities that's well known would be accounts receivables factoring. Otherwise, a little bit earlier than that would be work in production or PO finance. So there are groups out there, and this is really the world that Kickfurther lives in, is producing inventory prior to sale, right? But you get a PO, and if you deliver the inventory, you know that you'll be able to collect a certain amount from that purchase order, right? So let's say that's the situation a business is in. You would want to explore PO finance, which is groups like, they come out a little bit earlier than accounts receivables factors. Or the other thing to like kind of Google around and look for local groups is work in production finance. So WIP. inventory finance is another thing you can look for. And those groups, a lot of them are kind of still pretty old school, right? So look for local groups, go let them know you have an opportunity. They understand inventory. They understand the time component of how you need to hit production deadlines. And so they typically move pretty quickly because they're sensitive to that. However, they are old school. And so like oftentimes you're going to have to go meet them in person or whatever else. And typically we find that the costs are a little bit higher, right? Because they are coming in earlier and, they are conservative. So they're not going to incur costs on behalf of the business owners. And I'm speaking in a very general, typical sense here, right? There's like hundreds of these groups throughout the country. So, I can't tell you exactly what each one will do, right? But it's not uncommon that they'll run a diligence fee, right? So it's like, hey, if we're going to do all this work to find out whether we can lend to you, you have to pay us $500 on the front end, right? We have to run credit reports. We have to do this. We have to do that. It takes our time. You have to pay for it, right? So there's like a diligence fee. There's often an origination fee and other costs like that. But as with all finance, find who those people are and start talking to them. Even if you meet with them today and they don't provide financing for you today, it is an incredible proof point when you go out next year and say, hey, remember when I met with you and I had this great opportunity? Well, I'm still around. I have another great opportunity and that last one went really well and I did it without you. That's a great proof point for you to bring to that next conversation the next year when you might need even more support and continue to grow your business, right? So don't burn any bridges. Getting a no today doesn't mean that you won't get a yes tomorrow, and be a line, not a dot, right? A lot of this is still relationship based. So it's about building trust and credibility over time, often with an individual.
And then I know we have some brands that are obviously kind of listening to the webinar. If any brand kind of has like, what are you dealing with right now? Obviously, we're getting ready for Q4. You're making your plans for holiday. You need to make sure that you have enough inventory. Does anybody kind of like listening right now have like a issue that they're dealing with right now that they're trying to figure out how to finance the production that's coming up that we can kind of talk to Sean with about?
I could say one of the things we're seeing is with the supply chain disruptions, we have businesses that are placing their orders early, right? So the need of finance now, like before, you could kind of reliably expect to get your inventory in 8 weeks. Now it's like, if you have POs that have delivery deadlines, don't wait, right? Like you need to get that in, make sure that you're going to be booked on the freight, on the production schedule. You need to clear your whole supply chain. Otherwise, you're going to hit late deliveries. We're seeing this happening all across the industry. And if you've got like some holiday goods, like Christmas trees, for instance, right? Those POs often have a time is of the essence clause, where if you don't deliver it in time, the whole PO sinks and becomes worthless, right? So just be very clear about what your terms are with the vendors you work with, and make sure that you've got your production and delivery schedules really tied up right now, because there's a lot of disruption going on.
Yeah, I mean, we work with so many brands like just like that put their product in glass jars, and like the glass jar shortage is like crazy. The fact that like you just can't find like the vessel that you usually put your product in. So I think understanding kind of the world that we live in right now, the fact that every single item is shorted and that your normal ordering cycle is not going to cut it this year is critical. So again, anybody can kind of raise their hand and let us know like a problem that you're dealing with or something that you're working on that you want to kind of work through and kind of like that inventory issue that you're dealing with. Sean, I do want you to kind of go through like what Kickfurther is and kind of how that solution works, and how brands can kind of engage with you versus kind of like the more old school, archaic kind of traditional ways that brands would go and be able to finance their inventory.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna before I touch on Kickfurther, which is the best solution, obviously, I'll go and talk through a couple others, which I think are pretty interesting and could be a good fit for some of the entrepreneurs here. So one of the other things that I'm seeing a lot of activity in right now is equity finance. So if you are interested in equity, if you think that that's something you'd be willing to sell a piece of your company, there are more investors interested in investing in product companies today than there were even a few years ago, right? And definitely more than there were prior to the pandemic. And the reason, I think, is because we're seeing more opportunities to sell and exit out of products companies today with the advent of groups like Thraz.io, SellerX, Perch, and groups like that. So equity is available. Investors are interested because they know that there's a real exit opportunity. And if you've got a compelling, or if you know angel groups or groups like that, we have seen product companies we work with be more successful at raising equity recently than certainly during the pandemic, and also even I think before the pandemic. The other piece that I think is interesting if you're earlier stage is cost-free loans from Kiva Zip. Kiva, I think, just provides like a really cool service. I think they serve a sector of entrepreneurs that we can't really serve, but it's a great leg up if you don't have other finance options. And of course, I encourage businesses to reach out to their local SBA and banks, right? If you can get an SBA loan, that'll often be the cheapest capital you have access to. It's almost never going to be enough to fund and provide the finance you need to grow your product business, particularly through the seasonality of like Q3, Q4. But it can provide a start, and it will often be the cheapest capital that you have access to. And again, these are all things that take time. So having these conversations before you're like, you have to solve the problem tomorrow, you're going to end up with a much, much better deal than if you just get, kind of forced into the deal that's available to you because of time pressure. And I'll jump in on Kickfurther. So Kickfurther, the way we've solved this problem is we have an inventory crowdfunding marketplace. So back in the day, when I was running my merchandising company, we got these big POs and I needed to find somebody to pay for the inventory before I could deliver it and earn revenue. And at the same time, my sister ran a Kickstarter campaign. And in 3 weeks, she raised, $27,500 from people that never knew her, never met her. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. So that's like kind of the super high level idea is, hey, why can't we bring that community of people that are willing to support what I think are risky entrepreneurs that often have never done a production run? Why don't we bring those people over to these other entrepreneurs that have slightly more mature companies and give them an opportunity to buy inventory on a cost basis and then receive a portion of the profit when that inventory sells. So our innovation is we operate as a true consignment contract and a marketplace. So you come to Kickfurther, you tell us, hey, I need to buy 10,000 jars from my factory in China. You describe that inventory to us. We run a business through our scorecard diligence process. And then provided everything looks good, we'll launch the business on our platform. Our community of users can buy those jars. We aggregate those purchases together until we have 10,000 jars accounted for. And then Kickfurther, on behalf of our users, will go and place the order with your factory, have the jars produced and shipped to you, the business, and placed on consignment. And then as you sell through the inventory, we monitor that inventory and we invoice and debit a portion of your cost of goods plus whatever profit you offer our community out of the sale of your units over time as you sell through the consigned inventory. So it's pay as you sell finance and pay as you sell inventory funding. And one of the benefits in comparison to like revenue funding, like discounted purchase of future revenue funding or daily debit products, as they're often known, is, we know that inventory production takes time, right? It can take 60 days before you actually get the inventory and start selling it between a production lead time and shipping and freight and everything else. So when you work with those revenue groups, right, they will start taking revenue out of your account pretty much the next day if there is any revenue. Whereas Kickfurther, one of the pieces of flexibility that our entrepreneurs enjoy is that our funding is specific to the inventory on consignment, and you have the ability to produce the inventory, receive it, and start selling it before the invoices come due, right? So it's really, designed in such a way to not trap entrepreneurs or force any kind of entrepreneurs into bankruptcy, as long as there's no breach of our contract.
And what type of verticals are you seeing kind of the most success with this? Does it really matter what kind of category you're in, or are you really working across multiple verticals?
We work through, I say that we're product agnostic, right? So the reality is that I don't know what consumers in America want to buy, right? I've been very wrong about that sometimes. And so, the reality is that I don't know, and we don't make judgments based on the products, right? Or we very much consider ourselves product vertical agnostic. We do focus on consumer product goods though. So we're not really funding a lot of professional grade equipment today.
And how long does the process take to get set up with you? I mean, how, if I'm looking at bringing in inventory that I need in the next 60 or 90 days, is Kickfurther an option to get set up relatively quickly?
Oh, 60 to 90 for sure. So what's typical with our average time is 6 weeks. And the
Okay.
reason that our average time is 6 weeks is because most entrepreneurs learn about the solution with Kickfurther. They create an account, they understand what they would qualify for, and then they come back to us when they're actually ready to produce inventory and they need the funding, right? So we normally don't catch people right when they're ready to pay their factory. We can onboard a business in about 48 hours if everybody is very motivated and is moving very quickly. So that's about the shortest time to get a business onboarded. And then it's about roughly 5 business days from getting launched to typically having funds available to pay your supplier. And we have a 99.5% funding success rate with the businesses we work with at Kickfurther that qualify.
Are you seeing that the businesses that are working with you once are scaling with you for future production?
Oh, yeah. I mean, typically the entrepreneurs we work with. So one of the things that's nice is as you build credibility with our community, you just are able to raise more capital at lower rates over time, right? And this makes sense. You're building a relationship with hundreds of users that are quite happy to earn profit alongside you and your business, right? And so you can offer less profit on future deals as you continue to grow your business. So that's one of the things we often tell entrepreneurs is, hey, come to Kickfurther. There's no diligence fee, no cost to try it out, right? Set your first deal competitive with whatever costs you're currently paying. And then every single deal thereafter is going to get better and better and better for your organization. And you're going to know that the capital is there, right? As long as you're a performing company, you can count on our community to come over the top and continue to support you over time.
Awesome. And so I know we had one question in the chat. Did anybody else have any questions that kind of came up during that description? I think I see Sarah raising her hand. I'll unmute you really quick. There you go.
Hey, Cameron.
Hey.
Thank you guys. Thank you for hosting us. I'm Sarah, the founder of Gorilla Sparkling Tea. And this is definitely a challenge that we're facing right now. I would say one of the issues, like we're an emerging brand, we're early stage. And so one of the issues is, it's a good problem to have, but when we get into a new grocery chain, for example, we went into a new Southeast chain a few months ago. And so their first purchase order, of course, is quite large, right? To go into, let's say, 160 stores. So we get that purchase order, maybe it's $20,000. We ramp up production to fill that order. But by the time we get payment on that purchase order, when you consider the slotting fees going into new stores and then the introductory promotions, that check is going to be much lower than the value of their purchase order. So I guess my question would be, when we're looking at these financing options for production and inventory, I think it's just really challenging because by the time we get paid, there's really not a lot left over. And so my question is more about the repayment schedule, and the interest rates and what that would look like. And then I guess the second thing that I'd be interested in is, like, right now, we're going into some multi-packs. So, it's exciting. We already have approval for multi-packs for our product for about 200 stores in one chain. So I'm just looking at the numbers and how much it's going to cost to start producing a new item. And then, typically in grocery, it may be 90 days until we're actually paid on that. So that's what we're facing right now. Thanks for letting me ask that question.
Yeah, that's so I'm actually, funnily enough, currently advising a company that's a ready to drink beverage company. And I find that industry super interesting. I'm learning a lot about it, and it blows my mind because you're exactly right. It's hard, really, really hard to make a profit in the ready to drink industry, right? I looked up Oatly just IPO'd, and at $1 billion valuation, they're still not profitable. They're still burning cash, right? And so it's a very challenging problem, particularly it seems like ready to drink beverage with the bottling cost, with the promotion and all of the other costs associated with opening up doors. It does seem like it is a much more capital intensive business, a more capital intensive business than other product businesses I've seen that are like just, buying from a manufacturer and then selling at a 70% margin, direct to consumer through a website, right? So there are absolutely beverage challenges. One of the things we're going through right now, and honestly, it feels to me as an advisor to this other company that this is actually a really good fit for looking for an equity partner and an equity advisor that can come in and also be a strategic investor that can help you open up new doors, right? And connect you to the right suppliers that can keep your costs down and protect your margins. So sometimes, and I really don't recommend equity funding for product companies very often, but in the case of ready to drink beverage, I think that actually is a place where there's a fit for that. And I would just encourage you, Sarah, make sure as you go through it, right? Like inventory finance is one of those things where the biggest companies have these inventory finance challenges anyway. So as you build your model, right? Like there's this really classic entrepreneur mistake, right? Which is like, oh, I need to like race to the bottom on price so that I can, like sell my product. And like the classic example is you sell $1 for 80 cents, right? And like when you do all the math, actually every time you sell more, it costs you money. That is an entrepreneur trap, right? And unless like, hey, it's when I get to this level of volume, right? I'm out of that trap. Or when I've been in this store for this amount of time, I'm out of that trap, right? Like, but to have a view on the profitability for your business at large, and to make sure that the dollars and the cents add up in your business model, I think would be really critical. And then if it looks good, you already have been opening doors. Like this is the exact kind of proof that equity investors are like, wow, this is something that's already taking off without me. The entrepreneur sees the dollars and cents. They've got real unit economics worked out where there's a path to profitability, even if it's 10 years in the future after IPO, right? There's a path to profitability. And this is something that I want to get involved with. So it's a bit custom for your specific circumstance, but that's what I would do if I were in your shoes.
And
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, you're good, Sarah.
Go ahead.
You're good, Sarah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. We are opening up a safe round for equity. I've just been trying to bootstrap as long as possible. But yeah, I mean, the other caveat to that is like typically we have between 6 to 12 months in a grocery store to really prove ourselves. So it sometimes can take 6 months to even, get that volume rolling and pay off the slotting fees. And so now we're looking at, it's really important to put any extra, I don't want to say extra money, but whatever's left over into advertising. We haven't done any advertising yet, and that's what I'm really looking at now. So definitely need to start, advertising to build that brand recognition in stores so that, after we do have those first big POs filled and we've got product in store and we've got, the slotting fees paid off, we're in there to stay. Because there are certain grocery stores that are just, they don't give you a whole lot of time to prove yourself. So yeah, I agree with you. Equity partners that have experience in the space is pretty important in our sector.
Yeah, and I would just say, those equity partners, if you have built into your model, like, hey, we know that eventually finance is going to be a critical component, right? Because no equity partner wants to come in and then get diluted down for a decade, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to buy 20% today, and by the time we exit, I own 2%. That's like not super exciting, right? So having a plan of like, hey, you come in, right, and this is the capital we need, and then we're going to take this to exit, and everybody gets rich. They're going to be super happy to see something like that. So having a finance plan as part of your growth strategy will increase your credibility when you go to speak to those investors.
And kind of going off of that same topic. So Antonella asked in the chat, like, is it necessary to do a friends and family round before seeking outside of investment? I can personally say I don't think that that's necessary, right? You can raise and call it whatever you want, right? It's just really based off of the round size and technicalities, but you're not really restricted by anything else other than your imagination when it comes to what round you can raise right now and how much willingness there is from outside investors. But yeah, I think a lot of times too, it's like, especially depending on what market it is, like we work with mostly food and beverage brands here at WeStock. It is very expensive to stay competitive. You see most people doing equity rounds very early on. And I would say most of the brands that we see, do a small friends and family round just to prove out the concept and then go on to, a more official, pre-seed or seed round after that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's kind of how big's where's your network and where can you get the support that you need to grow your business, right? Sometimes that's friends and family, but the sky's the limit. And this environment is really great. There's a lot of liquidity right now. So liquidity looking for yield.
Any other questions for Sean about this topic? One popped up. I have a question as it relates to PO issues for holiday season. Let me unmute you really quick, Ellery. You're good, Ellery.
Hi, guys. Wait, I don't know if you can see me video-wise. I'm going to take my video off.
No worries.
I've been having yesterday a giant glass of water got dumped onto my computer while it was running. So at least it's still working. Yeah, so this is actually like a fairly recent thing. I actually was contacted by somebody from Kickfurther fairly recently. I know that whenever I was speaking with her, she said there needs to be, I guess, a minimum of $150,000 in 12 months trailing revenue to qualify for Kickfurther. So we're not quite there yet. Actually, we just launched at the very end of April. It was really more of a beta launch. They brought in a really, really small amount of inventory, and we've almost sold through everything. Just as it relates, we're a bra and underwear company. So in terms of minimums with what we're looking at going forward, this was a relatively small amount. We just actually started our marketing efforts to sell through the rest of our inventory. So we're almost there. We're really excited. We just had an issue come up. So I'm excited about Kickfurther. I know we don't technically qualify yet. Hopefully we will very quickly. But we have been working on moving away from our current manufacturing partner. The long and short of it is we have had an issue come up where we might end up being on the hook for about $70,000 worth of product that might not end up getting manufactured. So I was curious, without like getting into making this all about our problems and all about our company, like, are there any other alternatives in the here and now for a company like us where we're not quite qualifying? Like, we didn't even bring in the amount of inventory we would need to qualify for something with Kickfurther yet, but we're well on that path. I know there are a couple of funding options that have potentially become available to us. I know Shopify, we partner with Shopify on our website and on our distribution. So we're looking at what we can potentially do to make up for that in the here and now. The problem is we're in the middle of a fundraise. So we're just kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And we're trying to figure out, like, what can we possibly do in the here and now to get that funding quickly? I know you mentioned things like SBA loans and that sort of thing. So I'm just curious if anything else might come to mind for you. Like, we have traction. We were just getting started though. So there are certain things that we just don't qualify for yet.
Yeah. So options for where you are. You're currently raising an equity round. I think that's wise. I don't know if you've looked at things like Republic.co, where you can kind of do like a blend of rewards plus equity to raise money. I also think that rewards crowdfunding or just pre-orders is actually a pretty successful way for businesses to get some cash flow in the position where you are now, right? So you don't have the inventory, but if you can pre-sell, I mean, this is what Tesla did, right? To fund their Model S's, right? If you can get reservations and you can pre-sell and get pre-orders and use that cash to fund the production, revenue funded is the best way to grow any business, I would argue. And so I would investigate maybe potentially rewards crowdfunding. SBA loans are slow. Kiva Zip, I think, is up to $15,000 interest free. I think you have to, do a little bit of work for that. And then, other than that, it's networking, private family offices, and, asking people, talking to your advisors and your network and saying, hey, we've got a short-term gap. We need some bridge financing. I had an advisor once tell me that the way investors think about stuff is it's just risk v price, right? So it's risk adjusted return on capital. So we were in a pinch once and he was like, look, just go to your investors, just ask them what the price is, right? There's some price where the risk is worth it for them to take. And then you get to make the decision as an entrepreneur, whether you can afford to pay that price, right? So that was advice given to me when I was in a tight spot. And having those conversations and being very transparent about the fact, like, hey, this is what we need to move forward, and this is how you can help, and here's the opportunity. I think you can get pretty far with that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We've looked into Republic. Republic has been on our radar for a little while. I know Republic, very similar to like a Kickstarter. It just takes a little bit of time to get up and running. So probably not something that would help us in the here and now. But we have fundraised before, so we do have an investor pool, and I think we've had some conversation. This is all like very, very new, so this webinar was just so timely. So I just think, when we were kind of going and talking to a few other folks, and they were asking, are there any other alternatives that you guys have looked into? We just wanted to be able to come with kind of like a list of ideas and options in our mind. I had never heard of, I think you said it was Zip.
Kiva Zip.
Yeah, that's a great one for us to look into. I know SBA takes time, so I know we're left a little bit scrambling where we're trying to get something done quickly. I have a feeling it'll probably end up just coming from our current investor pool, but it's a weird position to be in when we are fundraising on top of that. So It's like we were already fundraising and now we're here. So this is really helpful though, and I'm excited about what you guys are doing, and hopefully we have an opportunity to qualify in the future.
Thank you, Ellery. Yeah, and I would also recommend, depending on where you are, I don't know what city you're located in, but some cities have really strong like entrepreneur ecosystem supports, and it might be worth like investigating that if you're in a place that's like, I don't know, like Boulder, where we started, had some really great support and you could network pretty quickly. So I would look at local resources, which I'm sure you already are.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Cool.
Great. Is there any other questions for Sean? Sean, I would love to maybe just kind of wrap up the webinar today with kind of where people can find you. Obviously, we're going to put this on our YouTube channel. We'll make it available to our broader audience. So I'm sure a lot of brands will probably reach out to you with questions about this topic, but also about Kickfurther. So kind of the easiest place for someone to find you would be super helpful.
Yeah, so I'm not a social media active person. I'm trying to get better at it. So LinkedIn is the best, or shoot me an email, Sean@kickfurther.com. I'm always happy to connect with entrepreneurs.
Awesome. I know this is a really pressing topic for a lot of entrepreneurs. I know, especially in CPG, it can kind of be the biggest hurdle that we're all trying to get past. So I really appreciate your time today, Sean. I also appreciate what you're trying to accomplish with Kickfurther, as I'm sure we all can appreciate that. And for everybody else, stay tuned. We'll send out our kind of like what our next webinar will be for next month. And thank you so much for joining us. So have a great day. I appreciate it. And this will be up on the YouTube channel probably by the end of next week.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Cameron. It was great to be here today. Have a great one.
Thank you, Sean.